Welcome back to County Connection. For our final segment of this April episode, we are excited to have some of our expert 911 folks here in the SCTV studio in honor of National Telecommunicators Month. Welcome Ann Marmon and Inger McDonald.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so National Telecommunicators Month, kind of a mouthful, but basically we are celebrating and honoring the great work that folks do in our 911 centers, and specifically our 911 center here in Summit County. So happy National Telecommunicators Month.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for the great work that you both do.
Thank you.
Your whole team. So, Ann, can you start us off by giving an overview of what goes on in the Summit County 911 Center?
Sure. We answer all 911 calls as well as non-emergent calls as well. We dispatch for all of law enforcement, including 6 agencies. Not State Patrol is the only one we don't do. And then we also do the 2 fire agencies that are in the county, Summit Fire in Red, White, and Blue, and then also the ambulance district. And then we also have some ancillary agencies like Road and Bridge, the coroner's office, social services, which we also dispatch for.
So you guys are really the hub of so much activity that's going on in the county, and that's not necessarily the way that it happens in communities, in other communities. Sometimes there are multiple 911 centers for all different jurisdictions, but here in Summit County, you and your team are really taking in everything that's coming.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about what happens when a 911 call comes in. What's actually happening behind the scenes? What should the person on the who's making that call be thinking about? Let's talk about that call process.
So when we get 911s, we get them typically 3 different ways. The third way is a new way, but ideally the call comes in from a landline phone. It's ideal because it gives us the location information instantly. It gives us the name of the person that lives at that address. And then the other way is through cell phones. About 12 seconds after the call comes in, we get a latitude and longitude of where the phone is. So that's great, but it's not instant like from a landline. And then we also have started to get a lot of calls, 911 calls from Apple Watches. And lots of the time it's an accidental. So we do get a lot of accidental 911s in general from cell phones. And we always have to call those back to make sure that there's not an emergency. But most of the time when people do call, it's a real emergency, and we first and foremost want to know where they are, where the emergency is happening, so that we can get help on the way.
Right, and in Summit County, that's a little more challenging than in some other communities, right?
Yes. Not everybody knows where they are all the time. So, that's why it's really helpful if it's a landline. So if you have an option, calling from a landline is really helpful because we don't really have to ask a whole lot. We can just confirm the information. But the latitude and longitude is very helpful too. We have special tools that help us plot that location on a map. And we can use that latitude and longitude to send search and rescue to those coordinates, or we can locate what the address is just on our map.
Okay, great. And then obviously in an emergency situation where someone is calling 911, there's something stressful going on for the most part. But if someone does have that second to kind of think through some things that might help make your job easier and get help on the way more quickly, what are some of those things that someone could be thinking about?
Well, I think it is hard to stay calm when the emergency is happening to you. So I think just cooperating with us as much as you can. It sometimes seems like we're short with people because we want to get them help as soon as possible. A lot of times people just want to tell us what is happening. They want to say, this is what's going on, but it's really not the most important thing to us. We're not really capable of helping them unless we find out where they are, send help to where they are, and then over the course of the time frame between when responders get there, we can help calm them down, we can gather more information. So I think cooperation is the most important. We can try to help calm them down. So I wouldn't necessarily tell people you have to be calm before you call 911. That's our job. They're the ones having the emergency. And we have lots of training to help us do that. It's just, we can come across as, we need this information, don't tell us what's going on. And it's really to help them. It's really to get them the help they need as soon as possible.
Okay,
And another
good to
thing
know.
that we have happen a lot too is when we have large scale events like the Peak 2 fire or maybe a large car accident where it's very visible, we might get a lot of calls. And so that's why it might sound like we're short, but because there's only 2 or 3 of us in there at a time. So if we get, more than 2 or 3 911 calls about the same event, we may very specifically be like trying to get that location very quickly and make sure it's the same call so we can move on to the next emergency call, just in case it's something different. So that's why it's just very important to know the location as best you can. If you don't, we'll help get you there, no problem. And then also to just listen to what we're saying and just try and answer the questions that we're asking.
Okay, great. So I want to kind of dive in a little deeper to something that Ingrid touched on, which is false 911 calls. So I suspect that maybe 15 years ago, this wasn't even a thing, or maybe it was like much smaller of a thing, but false 911 calls have really just kind of skyrocketed with the proliferation of mobile devices. Can you talk about what you're experiencing?
Yeah, we do get a lot of false 911 calls. Cell phones are kind of good and bad in the sense that, now you can call 911 when you're all different kinds of places, and right when you see that emergency happen, whether it be when you're out hiking or in your car driving around, stuff like that. So it's really helpful in that sense. But the downside is sometimes people don't realize that maybe their phone is still on, or the buttons kind of get mashed when it's in their pocket, and then they're calling us, and we treat every call like it's a real emergency. And so we make sure to stay on the line, and we make sure that it's not an emergency, and if we aren't able to speak with you, then we'll need to call it back. So if we have other 911 calls ringing that are legitimate emergencies, it's kind of taking our time away from those calls. So, if anything, if you could just try and, if we could let anyone know anything, if they could just try and lock their cell phones, turn them off when they're not using them. Like Ingrid mentioned earlier with Apple Watches, one of the things that is a good suggestion is going to your settings, because right now there's a default setting sometimes where I believe, I don't have an Apple Watch myself, but what I've heard is that when your heart rate goes above a certain number, which usually happens while skiing, then it will automatically call 911. So we have a lot of people who are like, my watch called you, I'm so sorry, I don't have an emergency. So if at all possible, try and do those things. But then if you realize it did go through and you don't have an emergency, just stay on the line. And that saves us the time of calling you back. At that point, we can just confirm that there is no emergency and let you go about the rest of your day.
Right. And I think that's a great point because, you could certainly imagine that someone might realize that it's happening and then just
hang up
because they don't want to bother you. But actually, it's more helpful if they stay on the line, let you know that it's an accident, and then you can move on and focus on something else rather than wondering.
It's really time consuming.
Yeah.
To answer the phone and we say a number of things because we always picture worst case scenario. That's what we're trained to do. And so we're trying to get to that 12 seconds where we get the latitude and longitude. And at that point we hang up, we know where they are just in case. We call it back, we wait for it to ring several times, go to voicemail, leave a message. So this can kind of turn into a spiral where the phone then answers and there's still no one there. And so I really think the message should be to be a responsible device owner and user and really ask yourself, do I need to have my phone on right now? The majority of the fake 911s are from ski resorts. It's people that are here typically on vacation. Maybe they just placed a call or did something on their phone and they put it right back in their pocket. Or something. I don't know exactly how it happens. I've never accidentally called 911, but I think you just have to enjoy yourself. Don't worry about your phone. Turn your phone off, and if you get back on the lift and want to see if someone's called, turn it back on, then turn it off again.
Right. And then also being aware of, like Ann said, that the emergency default settings, whether it's called SOS or whatever, being familiar with those functions.
Because every device is different, and it's good to know. Be a responsible user of your device.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Ingrid, you have been at the 911 Center for how many years?
8 years.
And how about you, Ann?
I believe it's at the center about 4, almost 5.
All right. So what keeps you coming back? What do you love about the job?
Well, it's very rewarding. When I came to this center, I left a job that I really enjoyed, but I had gotten to a point where I just didn't really feel like it was rewarding enough to leave my family every day. That was kind of the message I was telling myself, was I just really need to do something that makes me feel important enough to leave them. So it's extremely rewarding. It's challenging. There's always a new challenge. There's always something new to learn, whether it's technology or protocol or new officers, new users, new employees. So we're always hiring and training, and it's just exciting, and I love it.
Great. How about you, Anne?
I really like doing it too. It's kind of like my passion. I never thought I would be here. You know, I don't think anyone ever is kind of like when they're a teenager, I want to be a 911 dispatcher. But it's just so, it is very exciting. You know, every day at work, something new can happen. And then I just really like helping people, you know, because you made such a difference, you know. A lot of people, you know,
You're
once in their lives
step.
call 911, and then, you know, you're the one who was there to help them when they went through this most awful thing in their life kind of thing. So it's very rewarding.
Good. Yeah, definitely rewarding and challenging work that you do, and really important work that you do. And for any folks out there who think that whose interest has been piqued by your stories, there are some positions open, right?
That's correct. And starting pay is $21.28, and you also get an amazing benefit package from Summit County government. We have a lot of overtime opportunities, which is great. And the training program is for 6 months, and it's on-the-job training. When I started, it was really intimidating when I looked at that job description, and I just thought, there's no way I can do this. But the training program, you know, it's one phase at a time, and Anne and I are both trainers. I think we're pretty terrific trainers. We love training, and teaching is really important to us. So I would encourage anyone that thinks that this could be a good fit for them to apply.
All right, fantastic. And so people can just head over to the Human Resources section of the Summit County Government website.
That's correct.
And then I think also summit911.org, you can look for an application there as well.
Okay, perfect. And people can learn more about your operations and some other things there too.
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, ladies, thanks so much for the amazing work that you do for our community. It really is unbelievable. And thanks for coming into the studio today to share with our folks at home.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And thanks to those of you at home who've joined us for another episode of County Connection. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.